this good lady was faithful to the end. She stood there while the others except John, the males, had gone away, and she wouldn't leave the tomb either. That feminine bonding, which could have gone in a very different way, and perhaps did do in her early life, was going to go in a very different way. And indeed, for us hermits, she has been looked upon as a model, for she is known to have gone through the waters of the Mediterranean basin to the south of France, to Marseille, and gone there to La Sainte-Baume, where she lived for years as a hermit, and her skull is still there, it would seem. A model of those who wish to give their capacity to love to Jesus and only Him. What did she see? She was weeping, and therefore her eyes were blurred, and she was also not expecting to see the Lord. And it was when her name was called that that shiver went down her spine, and she realized what was going on. That tone of voice possibly changed, because the first one seems to be somewhat neutral. Woman, who are you looking for? But here we have the tenderness of the name, and also, one presumes, of the voice, a gentleness that she would have perceived. I remember one time, in around the mid-80s sometime, phoning home, and things hadn't gone too well, and my father spoke on the phone, and of course using our home language, Welsh, and not only Welsh, but the whole Welsh of mid-Wales, the farming area, where it's very quaint, and the accent that I had known as a child. And something inside said, this is goodness and this is home. Sometimes when one goes to a different culture and a different sphere, one isn't treated as one is used to being treated. But home, after all, is home. And here, Mary Magdalene knew, here is home. Her Lord was a personal Lord. These angels are curious. Some refer to one, some refer to two. There were lots of angels around, presumably, and maybe some saw more than others. In one gospel it talks about a young man, but it was an angel, because they do appear in human form. And they have strength as well, because remember, these ladies were puzzled, who is going to roll the stone away from us, because they had been there depending on strong men, like Nicodemus, Joseph of Arimathea, to roll this big boulder over the tomb. They couldn't in any way think of unrolling it themselves, so the angels did it for them. Presumably it happened like this before they got there. The angels must have had capacity to act, and they have. Angels can. I was involved in an accident the other month where the car was a write-off. We had a blowout just out of nowhere, and there one felt the protection of angels in what could have been quite lethal, because at high speed one is propelled all over the place and over the barrier until one comes to rest. But I was talking afterwards to a priest who had had the same kind of experience actually in his youth, and he was telling me something that happened to him and to another priest that he knew. And it was this, that people observing the accident coming to him, way back when he was a young man, actually I think a child, saw something inexplicable happening. There was going to be a lethal accident, and something came out of nowhere and transported him physically out of the way, miraculously. And the same thing happened to another person who was going to be ordained a priest. So the Lord wanted them kept alive. And Father Michael, my friend in Johnstown, we were students together in Rome and ordained about the same time and have the use of his church on a Sunday. Something similar happened to him, not once but twice. And I've seen on YouTube something happening there. It's the case of a person in America, I believe. It was caught on closed-circuit television. There was a person heading on for a mortal accident. It was quite clear there was no hope. He couldn't see what was coming up. And one sees appearing and it's put in slow motion for you to see what's happening, this figure coming out of nowhere, transporting him out of the way and then disappearing. So they are angels. And I was reading one day how something happened in Poland when there was a bus full of children going somewhere, and it was a long journey, and the good bus driver, as can actually happen, actually dozed off. And somebody realized what was going on. He was actually sleeping, but the driving wheel was moving without his help. He was in this position, and it was all happening by some force. It was, of course, angelic force keeping these children alive in what was going to be a lethal afternoon. It's important to be aware of the angelic world and to invoke this other world when we get into a car. Now, I want to today go into something which is fascinating. It's rather scientific, but it doesn't do any harm for that, because this is stuff which then answers scientists in their own terms. And what makes it more interesting is that this gentleman who's giving us this is actually a big person in the army, an Englishman, a Sir Charles Warren, who was general in the British Army. And therefore he's writing as a good Anglican, but also a scientifically orientated observer of facts. So, are you sitting comfortably? Then I shall begin. Sir Charles Warren was born in 1840 in Bangor. That's very close to where we live, where I was a student. By the way, Bangor has its foundation in 525 to be exact, way before Canterbury, which is 597. Close the parenthesis. Now, he was an archaeologist, an officer in the British Royal Engineers, and later General of the British Army, which participated in battles in Africa and Asia. In 1867, he went to Jerusalem as a member of the Palestine Exploration Fund and conducted a series of excavations that lasted until 1870. Amongst his findings is a network of galleries, tunnels, located under the Dome of the Rock. That's a holy place for Muslims, Jews and Christians, where it's purported that the sacrifice of Isaac was to take place, as well as an underground water supply system that was later named after him, the Warren Shaft. He also completed a detailed topographical map of the old city of Jerusalem. So I'm going to do all this, but this bit I will. He did, therefore, a lot of work when out there in Jerusalem, and he published them. And the title of the work is Underground Jerusalem. It was published in 1876 in London. So, he observes something which intrigues him. He notices that things happen at Easter. What's going on here? What is that fire? What is that fire which on Easter Eve lights up the lamps in the Holy Sepulchre? That a miracle attends the ceremony, there cannot be a doubt. He's an Anglican now, and a person of the army, not a religious fanatic at all. The British archaeologist was an eyewitness to the ceremony all 4 years he stayed in Jerusalem. And according to his assessment, there is not a doubt that it was a miracle. So the first one is, 1867. He had the intermediation of a distinguished French scholar, Charles Clermont-Ganneau, and through him he was able to secure a strategic observation spot within the complex. I believe it was where to this day the Franciscans pray. There's a gallery there where they have a chapel, a choir, and there are about 10 Franciscans there who can observe from where they are what's going on down the bottom. That belongs to the Latins. So he observes, I had seen the miracle of the holy fire on a former occasion, but now I was to have a more complete view through the influence of Monsieur Ganneau. He's standing directly, therefore, over the Holy Sepulchre. And by the way, at this stage there is still an opening in the Holy Sepulchre on top. So, he goes on to describe step by step what happens, what he has observed. At last, there is a feeling that the fire is at hand. Masses of tow, now this is the kind of wax candles they have at the time, are thrust forward. A flash at the opening, therefore that opening is still there at the time, on top, is seen, and these start to light. In a moment, as though by magic, now notice this bit, the fire extends itself in all directions. What's happening? They're getting lit independently by the finger of God. Warren, even though he is a member of the Anglican Church, does not hesitate to acknowledge the miracle's authenticity. Moreover, the miracle does not belong to the Greeks or to the Orthodox in general. It belongs to all Christians, and everyone can partake in it. The holy fire cannot be imprisoned or caged within religious orders. It can, however, interestingly, be enclosed in the hearts of all simple and virtuous people. Rapturous from what he, the phlegmatic Anglican, experienced, he, Warren, is the fourth eyewitness to describe the descent of the holy fire as a flash that descends from above. As he states, the flash appeared at the opening of the dome, which at the time still had a small opening towards the sky. Furthermore, he speaks of a torch that lights simultaneously with the appearance of the flash, and immediately afterwards he describes a miraculous dissemination of the holy fire inside the church. Now you can see it. It happens in a different way every year. It's on YouTube every year. And one sees, according to the variation, in general, it's those who are the katharoi, the pure virgins, nuns, monks, and uncontaminated souls, have the extra privilege. There's light, straight from God. And you can see the effect, those lighting directly, woof, in different order, ways all over the church. But you can also see very clearly the flashes, because as it's coming closer to the moment, there's already this element of divine manifestation before the real one comes, when flashes upon flashes become stronger. One gets the impression immediately that they're camera flashes, but if you play it slowly and watch them frame by frame, one can see there's no way, because you've got all these flashes coming at the same time. You can't get the same thing with regard to cameras, because they all go at different times. This is vroom, vroom, vroom. And if you go closely into slow motion, one can see they're blue. And they're coming out of nowhere, and the balls of fire going around. So this is therefore an energy which is not of this world. He is not, notice, referring to the usual dissemination of the flame from candle to candle. It needs quite a bit of time. You're talking about at least 1,000 people in there. But he describes a supernatural dissemination that was performed by the holy fire itself, which in a moment, as though by magic, goes round, flooded the entire church of the resurrection, extending in all directions at once. And you know, of course, that it's miraculous. They put it over their beards, over their chin, over their habit. If they're nuns, it doesn't burn at all for the first minutes, and it also gives an ecstatic feeling. It's also a different texture than ordinary fire, initially. So, his description is particularly revealing and in line with the testimonies of the previous centuries, because it goes right back. He wants to do all that he can, and he wants to get to those closest to it. At the time, for years, they used to refer to the bishop who would go into the inner chamber as the Bishop of Light, because it would happen in his hands. Strangely enough, at the time, he really wasn't the Bishop of Jerusalem, because for years the Patriarch of Jerusalem had been residing in Constantinople, and he was handed over to this one, who was a bishop in the area, to go in. But he wanted to have a personal contact with him, and did. On the 16th of March, 1845, Kyrillos II was elected Patriarch of Jerusalem, and he immediately abolished the tradition in which the patriarchs lived in Constantinople. That had gone on for about 250 years. He decided to live permanently at his natural home, Jerusalem. Now, he would be the successor, historically, of St. James, the first Bishop of Jerusalem. It has to be in his hands, or in the one he delegates. So, for a while, the other one still, by his desire of the real bishop, would do it for him. But in the end, it then stayed with the actual patriarch, and that goes on to this day, of Jerusalem, the Greek one. He speaks, the Bishop of Light, now, before he dies, of 2 rivers of fire that spread inside the church, and also informs us that in the middle of the 19th century, now notice this bit, the Muslims continued to attend the ceremony and celebrate the miracle with particular ardour. As you know, it is in the hands of a Muslim family that the key of the only door of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the whole complex, resides. It's neutral. They have it, and it's always in the hands of Muslims. And for a good while now, there was a kind of entente. It was interesting how this was happening. And they'd get hold of this miraculous fire and take it to the Dome of the Rock. So, this Bishop of Light has knowledge of what happens. And we have this description of what is going on. The Turks, therefore Muslims, divested him, and the authorities searched him. Now that still happens actually. They show in public there's nothing on him. No matches or whatever. And the church is in a state of poise. They put the amophorion, that's what goes over the shoulder. It's a stole, but it's bound together in the front. On him, he's otherwise very simply dressed, humbly, and takes off any big things he has. Opened the sepulchre of Christ. So these authorities opened it for him. It's been sealed in the morning, and let him in into the dark. Some time passed. I do not know how long, for we were all beside ourselves from a kind of fear. But all of a sudden, from near Christ's sepulchre, there shined a light. Soon, light also appeared from the altar in the royal doors in the opening, and it flowed like two rivers of fire, one from the west, from Christ's sepulchre, and another from the east, from the altar. Oh, what joy and exultation there was in the church then! Everyone became as though drunk or besides himself, and we did not know who was saying what or who was running where. And a great noise rose in all the church. All were running around. All were crying out in joy and thanksgiving. Most of all, notice the Arab women. Arab women. The Turks themselves, the Muslims, fell on their knees and cried, Allah, Allah. That's very interesting, the 1800s, how there was a bonhomie between the two. That is, O God, O God. Oh, what a strange and most wonderful sight. The whole church was transformed into fire. Nothing could be seen in the church besides the heavenly fire. On it goes. So, here we have eventually his interview with the Bishop of Light before he dies, and also with the one who takes over from him. It goes into great detail as to what happens, the way in which it's, as it were, a living flame coming out of the Holy Sepulchre itself. If one looks at it, there's a chink there when it comes out. And it actually has, as it were, weight. It's not just fire and energy. He is able to channel it. And each of the patriarchs over the centuries has different experience with it. All one has to do is read their testimonies. Now, with regard to its authenticity, it cannot be doubted. It's taken so seriously that designated airlines, once in the year, are allowed to have a naked flame in them, because it has to go to the main patriarchs of the world. Therefore, it will go in a kind of lantern which looks rather like what they used in Wales in the coal mines. Quite secure, but it's there, the flame taken from the finger of God, and it goes to Athens. And actually, was it last year, there was a bit of a complaint from secular people there that the government should not be paying for all this, but it goes to Athens, it has to go to the patriarch there, it has to go to the metropolitan in Athens, it goes to all the patriarchates of the Eastern world, it goes as far also as the west to Vienna, and it also comes, yes, to Dublin, because I have an Eastern Orthodox Romanian friend who comes to visit me and big into prayer, and she gets it. And the priest, was it last year or the year before, was warning them, you must not come for the Holy Light alone, you must come for the whole celebration. So it comes also there. And it comes, of course, to Moscow. And each year you can see it, because it's picked up on YouTube. It comes to the airport, and there's a bishop waiting for it, and it comes from the airport to Moscow, where it's given to Vladimir Putin. So, Vladimir Putin, whatever you say, is recognizing for not just 20 minutes, but 3, 4 or 5 hours standing, that Christos Voskresi, and it's very, very moving. You watch the Eastern Liturgy, and this happening with the bishops, and the massive cathedral they have rebuilt, in Moscow, and they can't stop singing and chanting, Christos voskresie, Christos voskresie, Christos anesti, alithos anesti, he is risen, truly risen. And of course, God is in the midst with this living fire that he has ignited with his own finger. It has been asked, what did Our Lady mean when she said that in the end her Immaculate Heart would triumph, that Russia would be converted? It would seem that they were trying to wriggle out of Lucia before she died what that meant. And it would seem that actually it did mean what it meant. Not just that they would become a Christian nation, but it was the project of God that they should become also recognized. Now, the thing is, it would be unimaginable that they should become Western Rite or anything of the sort, but it's not impossible, given Rome's open-mindedness, that they could be given their own rights, but in some way recognize the position of the Pope of Rome. It's a delicate one, but we mustn't ignore our Eastern brethren. I just conclude. God is not just backstage. Whatever the media may say or want to say, it's his creation. The resurrection is the center of history. And no matter how much noise man may make, even those who control RTE and the whole of this nation right now, one day will be silent. No more will their voice be heard, and only silence will be heard in the tomb. But there, their soul too will be naked before the Alpha and the Omega, the one who is power itself, and before whom no man can have the last word.